Welcome to Limitless with Lisa Z, a podcast about how to move from inspiration to action and bring our dreams to life. I'm Lisa Zahiya, and each week I'll release 2 podcasts, one where I walk you through action steps about how to make your dreams a reality, with another podcast in which I interview amazing changemakers from all over the world. This podcast isn't just for listening. Take notes and take action. Let's ignite and change the world together. Welcome to Limitless with Lisa Z, a podcast with your host, Lisa Zahiya, that's me, that is all about moving from inspiration to action. This podcast combines actionable podcasts with interviews with amazing humans who are changing the world, and that's what we are here for today. This is episode 1, season 1 of the interviews. Today's guest is the amazing Rae McDaniel. Rae is a licensed therapist, certified sex therapist, gender specialist, coach, educator, and author. They are the founder and CEO of Practical Audacity, a gender and sex therapy practice in Chicago, Illinois. They are also the author of this amazing book, Gender Magic, an amazing book we discussed today. It also has the best first sentence of a book I've read in a long time. So I'm so excited. Let's jump into the discussion with Rae. Rae, I am so glad that you're here. And my first question for you is, what was inspiring to you today?
Such a good question. I'm very excited to be here as well. This might be a strange one for you. So I saw a post on Instagram today of an octopus riding a jellyfish. I know, right? And I'm continually in awe and inspired by nature and the ways that nature is so creative when it comes to not only surviving, but thriving. And how beautiful and strange it is.
Have you ever seen the Instagram account Nature is Metal?
No, but now I will look that up immediately.
Yeah, for everybody. It is, I mean, if it's a little gory, but it's like how metal nature is. And I agree. It is amazing. And this morning I was standing, not nature, but it was like cloudy in New York and all the skyscrapers were like peeking out of the clouds. And I was like, the world is an amazing place. But Rae, what is inspiring for you in general? Where do you gather inspiration from?
So many things. I mean, I think obviously nature and space, the cosmos are really big inspirations for me. I think they're amazing. They fill me with a sense of awe a lot. My Instagram feed has caught on to my whale obsession. So now I get a lot of things of people like touching whales and picking barnacles off of whales and things like that. I also am continually inspired by the incredible humans in my orbit. You know, I have a lot of friends who are doing really amazing things, and I respect their minds so much, and I love watching them do their things. Generally, I'm really inspired by humans' ability to thrive and find pleasure and joy in the midst of what often feels like a world that is on fire. And then at a very base level, good design and good art, things that make you feel a way when you walk into a space, that is incredibly inspiring to me.
Yeah, that's lots of good reminders. Have you gone whale watching?
No, but it is high on my list.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I just can't imagine. You know, it's like the first time I saw Beyonce in person. Like, whales are amazing, but they're also real.
Yeah, it feels wild. I attempted to go one time, but it was too choppy out, so we had to turn around. But I will see a whale. I will.
Awesome. Amazing. I'm going to stay on topic, I promise. So I'm like, ooh, whales. So the whole point or my intention behind this podcast is bringing on people who inspire me because they've taken what inspires them and put it into action. And I think a lot of people get stuck there. You have started and created a company. You recently wrote a book, which we're going to learn more about. But can you talk a little bit about, like, how did you go from a personal journey to I'm gonna do this with my life. I'm gonna do this with what I'm putting out in the world. Like, Can you help me connect those dots?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, I'm non-binary,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote a book that is all about gender freedom and
Mm-hmm.
gender exploration. And I run a company, a therapy company that primarily focuses on queer and trans folks, but really anybody who is in line with those values.
Yes.
Um, I, and this may seem like a strange place to start, but I promise it's relevant. I'm a double Capricorn. In fact, I have 6 placements in Capricorn in my chart, which means that my life has followed this very Capricornian journey of my work and my personal development happening hand in hand. So it wasn't, I had this big personal development journey and then I decided I was going to do this with my life. It was
Right.
very much at the same time as I am going through a personal development journey to my queer identity, to my non binary identity, just me as a human being,
Right.
while I am also digging in as a therapist with my queer clients, with my trans clients, and noticing that those paths are very aligned. And
Mm-hmm.
that has kind of been a pattern throughout my entire life. So it wasn't one decision point. I would say it's been a very long and windy road. Creating my own company was a lifelong dream. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, I had little like P&Ls when I had a little airbrush t-shirt
Wow.
company. Like I've always been this way. Um, so it was a lifelong dream. I was working as the COO, the chief operating officer at another practice, and the owner of that practice made some decisions that were not in line with my values, and
Okay.
I made a pretty quick exit. I resigned after 5 years and hopped over to a friend's company in full disclosure that I wanted to create my own. Was there for about 9 months getting my legs underneath me, and then launched Practical Audacity, my therapy company.
Mm-hmm.
Had 18 clients my first week and had 5 employees within the first year. So
Wow.
that just kind of took off wildly. And I'll also pause there before I monologue at you for a long time.
No, I was like, yes, I'm following it.
Okay, great.
I think that that's really interesting because what I'm hearing and what I get inspired by is you didn't wait until you're like, now I've fully figured this out in my life. And, like took something that was very personal, choosing who I am and my expression as a human, which, as you said in the book, continually evolves.
Hmm.
But instead, we're like, I am doing this, and then I'm also creating a space for this for other people.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's one thing that I talk about a lot and that I teach is that I do think that people get very stuck in this. I have an idea, I have to figure it all out, and then I take step one. But a lot of times people don't ever take that step one because they don't have step 10 figured out. And the
Right.
reality is that we get so much more information about what we want, about what we're going towards, about what it takes to quote unquote succeed, whatever that means to you, by taking little steps forward and by testing things out and by trying things out. And that action informs the next step 1.5 and step
Right.
2, and you
Right.
go from there.
Yeah, I said once and I was like, "Oh, I should quote myself. The only bad decision is waiting because how am I going to
Yes,
know if I only think about it?" And especially like when you're exploring something, when you're exploring identity, like there's not a right answer, there's trying.
exactly.
Yeah. Do you feel like that so your work and your life are sort of growing in parallel? Do you feel like your work I'm just thinking about how I want to say this. Like your work and your life, and I also have had a very parallel structure. And I think I have become a better teacher because I'm going through the same things.
I think that's absolutely true. And not in a way that I am, talking to my clients every step of the way about my journey,
Sure.
but I learn things. It gives me some spidey senses. It gives
Hmm.
me some experience that then I'm able to be curious about those things with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that absolutely has helped. And I've never positioned myself as I'm the person who knows all the things and I'm going to teach you all the things. It's always been I'm going to walk beside you and help you figure this out for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I really got that in the book is that it wasn't like, which gets out of, I think, a lot of what can be problematic in the world. This is the way you should do it, and this is the only way you should do it. What I experienced was a lot of like, here are some choices. And then like, here is some gentle ways to support yourself while doing that. And I'd imagine, especially exploring gender identity, that sense of like creativity and play is really important.
It's absolutely important. And it's a completely different state of mind to be in a creativity and a play place than a I'm running away from something. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Emily Nagoski talks about in her book Burnout the owl and the cheese study. And essentially what happens is you have two groups of people in this experiment. They get a little paper maze, like a coloring book sheet. One of them has a mouse that is running away from a big scary owl in the corner. And the other one has a mouse with this maze that is running towards a piece of cheese. And what they found is that the mouse running towards the piece of cheese, that experimental group made it through the maze faster. So what that says is that we are more oriented to what we are moving towards and have more momentum for action and more clarity of mind than when we are in this fear place or running away from something.
Sure. I mean, it when you say it like that, it makes a lot of sense. Like in a very physical way. Also, I want to orient towards what I want in front of me.
Exactly.
Right. Something that I noticed, your business name, Practical Audacity, the book, the gender magic. Like I was like, that sounds like a game I want to play. Like that, and then you talk about it in the book. Like it feels positive and joyful. Why is joy, fun, important in life, and then especially for people who are doing gender exploration?
Absolutely. I talk a lot about joy and play and pleasure in gender magic, and it's because it's our roadmap. It's our guidepost. Not only does it put us in this different part of our brain where we are able to make decisions and take action from a grounded place that is hopeful, but it also recharges us. Now, what is the point of living generally, but specifically with gender magic, going through the process of exploring gender, of potentially transitioning your gender, if we're not oriented towards pleasure, if there's not pleasure and joy and connection along the way, that is the
Right.
point. That is why we're alive. So, whatever we're doing in our life and whatever is happening in the world, there is a lot we could talk about how the world is on fire, sometimes literally. But in the midst of all of that, we still have to live. And those things are reminders of why we are here, of why we fight for what we fight for.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you keep that in mind for yourself? Especially like as a therapist. And how do you choose to incorporate joy?
That's a very good question. One of the ways that I keep that in mind when I'm working with other people and have a lot of responsibility and talk about these sometimes really heavy topics is it's going to sound really obvious, but boundaries.
Yep.
And not only physical boundaries, but emotional, like psychic boundaries as well. I have pretty hard physical boundaries. I typically do not check email or answer my phone for anything work related, nights and weekends. I have boundaries about my capacity, what I have the capacity to give, what I don't. I have made friends with the word no and gotten way used to disappointing people in the sense that people are always going to want things from you. And I want to give as much as I can, but I cannot give from an empty cup.
Sure.
So making sure that I maintain those boundaries for myself.
Mm-hmm.
On the emotional side, I think my experience as a therapist has really helped with this
Sure.
because I've learned over time how I can sit with someone else's pain or struggle or support them in that, but not take on their pain as my own.
Mm.
And that is a very hard skill, but it is very possible. And I think some of it for me comes from perspective. That one of the first things I did when I got out of grad school as a therapist was I worked with Iraqi survivors of torture. Right. And once you've done that, it puts pretty much everything else into a perspective. So
Yeah.
it takes a lot for me to be shocked by something,
Sure.
which helps. And then the focus on pleasure and joy and connection. That's something that I want in my work as much as possible. And I'm very, very proud of the team that we've created at Practical Audacity right now. It does feel like that, where we are
Mm-hmm.
working together really well and doing our very best to center ease and positivity and a non-urgency culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the personal side, setting boundaries for myself about when I work
Mm-hmm.
and intentionally incorporating a lot of awe and a lot of things that bring me joy in both big ways and small ways into my life. One of the tiny ways is that I have reconnected with reading fiction, and
Mm.
in particular, things like sci-fi or speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I have decided that my first cup of coffee every day is spent reading a book that has nothing to do with work and is not productive at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're pointing out something really important is that there's like the big joy and then there's the little moments. There's the octopus and there's the jellyfish and we can infuse it within our life, which is to me it's everything. Which are like what are these little moments and how am I enjoying it? So I love that. So, Rae, the book presents a model, the gender freedom model. Tell me what that is.
So the gender freedom model is a guide. It's not a step-by-step linear model, but it is a guide of key principles, pillars, mindsets, and tools that will help people explore and transition gender with more ease, with more hopefulness, and with more pleasure. So it's based on the pillars of play, pleasure, and possibility,
Mm-hmm.
which you might have guessed from our conversation thus far. And it shows people and anybody who is interested in exploring gender or ideas about gender freedom
Mm-hmm.
how to think about those things in a way that is more expansive. And not only how to think about them, but how to take, based on the name of your podcast, this inspiration of the world that we want to create and
Mm-hmm.
actually take steps towards it, about how to imagine the person that you want to be and as much freedom as you can possibly imagine. And then how do we practically get there? And how do we practically get there in the world that we're living in today?
Yeah, I love that. When you talked about it or you introduced it in the book, you talked about being in Lisbon, Portugal, and getting lost and just enjoying, which I thought, oh, they're very present. Like you can't be lost and worried about something. You just have to be like, I am here. How does that parallel to what you're advocating and helping people with in the book?
Yeah. So the experience in Lisbon, I was in the oldest part of Lisbon, which if you've ever been,
It's beautiful.
it's so beautiful. And you could get lost there for days and be the happiest camper. They have little cafes
Yeah.
where, it's like five, six people that can fit in this restaurant or cafe, and it is just a beautiful experience. And what struck me about it is that I wasn't pulling out my phone and looking at Google Maps. I had zero idea where my hotel was. I didn't know what I was going to eat for dinner. And I did not care at all. I was enjoying the journey and being present in this beautiful place. And the vibe that I wanted to create with the book and what I wanted to do with the gender freedom model is to give people that. How do we stay present? How
Mm-hmm.
do we enjoy the journey? And how do we take our focus off whatever success means, whatever the destination is, and really view the journey as the prize, as the experience that we are going for, and be present and enjoy every single step of the way without being so caught up about where we're going or even what the road looks like to get there.
Yeah. I mean, and this is so important, but I was like, shouldn't we really do that with almost everything?
Oh, yes. I think so many of the principles in this book can be applied very broadly. I've worked with queer and trans folks for the past 10 years, but those lessons and the things in gender magic are not specific to an audience of people who are transitioning their gender. These are
Right.
lessons for everyone that are applied in a gender freedom way, but
Sure.
that are so applicable in every other area of people's lives as well.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who's cisgender, I read it and I found it super helpful as one, reminders of how to be in the world.
Hmm.
Two, reminders of like what I am choosing and what I was told I'm supposed to be.
Yes. And that's the thing. No matter what your gender identity, no matter
Yeah.
what sex you were assigned at birth, we all get given this quote unquote manual of
Yep.
how we are supposed to show up in the world. And even if, let's say, you were assigned female at birth and you grew up and say, hey, I'm a woman, that feels awesome to me, which I
Mm-hmm.
fully support, we still get put in these boxes of
Yeah.
what we're supposed to wear, what we're supposed to value, even what jobs that we're supposed to take, how we move our bodies. And I believe that an important part of self growth is questioning all of that, no
Mm-hmm.
matter where you land, because it's not about changing who you are, it's about consciously being able to choose this is how I want to show up in the world. This is how I want to express my gender to the world. And societal norms be damned.
Yeah. The thing that it made me think about is I enjoy a femme presentation and
Hmm.
it's fun to play with. What do I want to wear today? Do I want to wear makeup? But more that like I've been criticized a lot for people saying, "Oh, you're too aggressive."
Mm.
Or like, and it goes into the thing that drives me crazy is being like, "Go more into your feminine." And I'm like, I always said if somebody says that to me again, I'm going to punch him in the face, which is very New York of me.
I don't blame you. It's really annoying.
It's
Uh,
annoying and it's damaging.
it's so damaging. And I think one of the things that is so damaging about that is this um, pushing together, mushing together, if you will, femininity and softness.
Yeah.
And that's not accurate. Neither is it accurate to mush together masculinity and hardness. We are all humans that contain so many parts of ourselves, and hard and soft parts, and we express them differently. And one is not more feminine than the other.
Right.
And yes, we're in this world where if someone who is a cisgender woman or presents more femme is in any way, I'm going to use the word strong
Mm-hmm.
or vocal, really,
Yep.
in any way, they're considered aggressive. And this is not a surprise. We've heard it 1,000 times that there is a double standard for that. And I think we see that across gender, how people think about gender, and the ways that people show up in the world that are unconscious, where I'm going to say that over again.
Yeah.
I think we see this across society and how we think about gender and how people show up in their gender and the quote unquote rules that society puts on us about how we should be. And I think all of those things are worth questioning and
Mm-hmm.
consciously and intentionally choosing for ourselves.
Absolutely. And it made a big impression on me to think about that. Thank you. And to be like, this is damaging to me, and the world is very accepting of me.
Hmm.
So what is this doing for other people who want different ways to express themselves and make themselves be more of themselves?
Exactly. I mean, I don't need to tell very
Sure.
many people about the wave of anti-trans legislation that is happening right now. It's a scary world that we live in for anyone who
Sure.
is outside of a gender norm, whether that is a cisgender person or a transgender
Sure.
person. It's getting more and more dangerous to express yourself outside of what society says we should.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the flip side of that, I think we're seeing that pushback because there has been so much more conversation, so much more freedom, so much more education about what gender means, about the ability to choose how we want to show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that backlash is going to happen anytime that we see a social movement push forward,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, social movements towards equality of people that society has historically said are not equal or
Sure.
human.
Sure. And I think amplifying that for people is a great reason for people to educate themselves, read this book, but also like it is personally helpful. Yeah, so thank you. One thing, Ray, that you talk about in the book is design thinking. And you touched on
Yes.
this a little bit in the beginning, like the idea of taking baby steps. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I discovered human centered design thinking and my brain just lit up
Mm-hmm.
because it was taking things I was already thinking and doing and putting it into a model that I could grasp and teach. Essentially, design thinking is saying we're going to take a bias to action. We're going to play and we're going to experiment with creative ways to solve problems that feel unsolvable, like
Mm-hmm.
world hunger, like poverty, like homelessness. And the things that people come up with through this particular modality of thinking are really astounding. And the difference here is that it's not about getting stuck in your head. It's not about endlessly mulling over what is the perfect solution to this problem. It's very much a social enterprise, which I love. It's collaborative and
Mm-hmm.
it says, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and we're going to see what sticks. And we're going to do that by taking tiny steps towards what we think might be a solution. And every tiny step, we're going to stop, we're going to reassess, see
Mm-hmm.
how that worked, and then we're going to adjust. So it's a very quick way to generate creative solutions. It's a very quick way to get the ball moving when so many people feel frozen because of the bigness of a problem.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just like all these things that you're referencing. I'm like, well, we need that for everything. Um,
Agreed.
yeah. And it goes back to the point that we we as humans tend to sit and think and contemplate, which can make something very small feel very large.
Mhm.
So, with the baby steps, how have you used that for yourself? I mean, in any aspect of your life.
Sure. I will use, so I've had top surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use that as an example, but there's so many other parts of my life, including building a business that I have
Yeah.
used this kind of process. But to give you an illustration, so I'm non-binary. I don't have a ton of negative feelings about my body, and I never
Mm-hmm.
have. And I'm very lucky in that is that I don't have a lot of body dysphoria. But what that did is it put me in a place where the narrative was, oh, you have to be miserable in your body and then you make changes. And so I was stuck thinking for a very
Mm-hmm.
long
Mm-hmm.
time, several years about, well, do I want to keep my chest as is, or do I want to have top surgery?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, how I made those tiny steps was coming to terms with is not the right phrase, but accepting and digging into this idea that you don't have to hate something about your body, about your life, about how you exist in order to change it for something better. That was a huge piece. So I was there. I'm like, okay, this is worthy of exploring, even if I don't have this hatred about my body. So what I did was I actually made an appointment with a surgeon. And I think a lot of people are like, oh no, you can't do that before you know for sure if this is what you want. But the truth is that you are not having surgery until you have an IV in your arm and you are going to sleep. Any point before that, you can walk out.
Yep.
Maybe there's a cost, but it's not that big of a cost. Like, you can do that. You can do it. So you were not actually making the decision until you were in the room and you no longer have a choice. So going to the doctor, asking good questions, that was just a data point for me. And I assessed how I felt afterwards and going into that appointment, and it caused butterflies in my stomach, the good kind. That is a data point. So I took one more step. I made the appointment, a few months in advance to have the surgery. I got the materials that I needed. I looked over those. I explored different types of surgical techniques and made sure that what the doctor was going to do aligned with what I wanted for my body. And every single one of those steps was a data point where my gut said yes or it said no. And based on what my gut said, which was yes in this case, I took another step forward until I was sitting in that operating room and I was getting sleepy, and I felt very confident in that decision because I had made it from a grounded place. I had assessed how I felt every single step of the way. And I took those steps before I was 100% certain. And the action of taking those steps before I was 100% certain is what gave me the confidence in my decision that I needed.
Yeah. That there's a inherent self-trust built in there. Like, I know and I trust myself to sit and be present, and at any point I can say yes or no.
Absolutely. It is all an effort to build that self-trust and to build that connection to your intuition, to your gut, to, in therapy language, your wise mind, where you're taking your thoughts and your cognitions and your pros and cons list and all the things, and you are pairing it with, how do I feel about this decision? And from that place, you're largely going to make very grounded decisions. I think the other thing that's important here when it comes to self-trust is understanding that most decisions that you make in your life are fairly benign. They are fairly neutral, regardless of the outcome. And where people get stuck is this fear of, oh, I'm going to make a bad decision and then I'm going to regret it. When in fact, we often regret the outcome of a decision, whether or not the decision itself was good or bad. So can I give an example of this?
Sure, please.
Okay. So let's say you decide to move to New York and you make the decision, you get there, you're like, New York is awesome. It's everything I hoped it would be. There's all these different cuisines. It's the city that never sleeps. I'm having a great time. You're going to say, wow, I'm super smart. I made a great decision. And you're going to build that self-trust in yourself. Now, let's say same decision, you decide you're going to move to New York. You get there and you don't like the trash on the sidewalks. Everything is really expensive. It takes forever to get everywhere. You're not making friends the way you thought. You are more likely to say, wow, I regret that and I made a bad decision. When the truth is, the decision was neutral. The outcome could have gone good, it could have gone bad, but you made a decision given the information you had in that moment. And that decision is still a good decision, regardless of what the outcome was. We also don't know that the decision to stay wherever you were previously would have turned out any better. And in fact, research says that we're more likely to regret decisions not made than decisions made, which speaks to what you were saying at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. And that I have found in my life that because I think about them as neutral, I'm always like, well, let's just try it.
Exactly.
And that also has allowed for a lot of freedom in play. So I was like, let's see what happens in New York. It's amazing. It also smells like pee. Like we're gonna figure it out. You said two things that I wrote down. One is like you don't have to be miserable to change something. Once again, applicable on a very wide range of pretty much everything, but like you're allowed to change without feeling misery.
Yes.
And that's amazing. And you don't have to hate it to change it. I mean,
Yep.
like and it goes down to like taking there's this like false seriousness to a lot of things. Like
Hmm.
I didn't hate my legs when I got these tattoos. Now I like them more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's this idea that the status quo is good, right? And we can't change it unless something is bad.
Hmm.
And that's so limiting.
It is.
Instead of saying, well, what would happen if I got tattoos on my legs?
Hmm.
And it was a great outcome. You loved it.
Yeah.
But taking those risks, it requires the trust in yourself to take a risk that you think what you have now is good, but what you could have is great.
Hmm. And it's all just a big adventure. So let's see what happens.
Exactly. This attitude of, well, wouldn't it be fun if, or I wonder if, or what if it did work out?
Absolutely. And one guiding force that you referenced was you were like, "Oh, I felt butterflies," which that is listening to your body. And in this case, listening to your body about your own body, which you have the autonomy to do. But like, how do people learn to listen to themselves? Because we know our
We
body
do.
knows. How do I
Absolutely.
start tuning into that, especially if I'm not feeling connected to my body?
That question really resonates with me a lot, not only as a trans person, but also as somebody who grew up in a very religious home where, and also have chronic autoimmune disease.
Hmm.
My entire life has been my body's the enemy, or I'm not allowed to really be present in my body in many different ways and layers in my life. So it's been a hard won battle for me to actually feel connected to my body.
Hmm.
And it happened in a lot of very small ways. And we've been talking a lot about tiny steps and taking action and paying attention and presence. And I think those are the keys is pay attention. If you can be present in the moment, and we have these wonderful things called senses, that presence, the easiest way to get there is to simply tap into literally your sensations in the moment. You know, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you taste? What do you feel? And the more you're able to bring yourself back to that, the more present you're going to be able to be. And when you do that, you can do things like take a sip of tea and say, hey, this feels really good. I
Mm.
like this. It's that moment of I like this, I don't like this. I want this, I don't want this. And a lot of it is simply paying attention. And you can do it in tiny ways, even making decisions about where you want to eat or what you want to eat.
Hmm.
Saying, okay, I want Thai food tonight or I want tacos. Maybe you get the tacos and you're like, oh, I kind of actually wanted the Thai food. That's a data point.
Hmm.
And the more you're able to do that and start noticing, okay, this is what it feels like when I want something, when I like something. This is what it feels like when I want a different thing or don't like something. That expands and we grow our capacity from there to bigger and bigger things where we are able to tune into our gut and our intuition much more easily because we built that muscle.
Yeah, so continued practice and as somebody who's a weightlifter, it's like I'm not going to use the tiny weights, which, talking about messed up stuff, are always pink. Anyway, but I'm not going to use 200 pounds if I've never done it before. But like little challenges so I can start to build up that muscle of, in this case, listening to your own body. And to me, what a skill, because then you're like, oh, I trust myself.
Exactly. And I think the one thing there about the tiny steps is that I don't mean stay in your comfort zone by tiny steps, is that the things that are going to give you the most information and really build that muscle is exactly what you were talking about. It's not the tiny pink, I know, weights, but it's not the weights that are going to throw your back out either.
Right.
It's the thing in the middle that maybe makes your muscles shake a little bit. That is hard, but is just hard enough that you can work up to it or you can do it, but it might be a little uncomfortable. That's the zone where we really learn a lot about ourselves.
Sure. How do I give myself permission to start exploring? Because a lot of, to me, a lot of what we're talking about today is exploration, standing on the front of the ship. Let's see what's out there. It's uncharted. How do I say, okay, Lisa, Rae, it's time? How do you do that for yourself?
It's a really good question.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, how did you do it? Because you are vulnerable, you're open, you're out in the world. Like, how did you give yourself permission to start that?
I think for me, one of the biggest things was having experiences in my life where I felt really seen and really authentic and really lit up. And once I had experiences like that, my brain was like, hell no, we're not going back to never having those. And the more and more I had of those, the less tolerance I had for a life that I didn't feel that way. And I think at the very beginning, that permission always has to come from within. There's nobody else that is going to be able to give it to you. And it comes, it might sound trite, but from a simple decision of, I have one life. I might as well live it as myself. And I might as well live it as the biggest, best version of what my life could look like. And I believe I am worthy of going for that. And that decision leads to everything else. From there, you start building that self-trust. You start building that connection to your intuition. You start building opportunities for pleasure and connection and play. And the more and more you feel those things, the more permission you give to yourself. And it becomes this snowball of you're no longer willing to accept a life where you don't feel that way in your day to day. You know, I cannot imagine a life where I go back to rural Louisiana and hide my queer and non-binary identity behind a facade of being cis, of being straight, and have my little house with a white picket fence and a community somewhat, but also of people who don't actually know me or see me for who I am.
Right.
That possibility feels like death to me. I could not do it. There is absolutely no way. And the more you are able to see, like, this is what it feels like to be me, the more it feels like death and an impossibility to go back to anything else.
Yeah, I love that. There's two things that really resonated there for me. The first is, like, you have to accept that this experience is finite. And so I'm like, one time I was in a dressing room and they were like, you don't ever say anything negative about yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm going to die. So look at what I got right now. It's, it's amazing. And
I love that.
The second thing you said is, like, everything you talked about was slightly outside of that comfort zone. If that's a circle, you say in the book, everyone is magic. The magic is outside of this little circle. Yeah.
exactly. I think part of that and what resonated with me about that is this idea that you cannot imagine all the possibilities right now. And the only way to imagine those and to move towards those is to take those steps into something that doesn't feel so overwhelming that, you know, you're actually going to puke, but
Right.
also doesn't feel so safe that you're not making any movement. And we start to see the magic happen when folks are willing to step out of that comfort zone, do something that's a little bit scary,
Mm-hmm.
and then they kind of level up in what they imagine as a possibility. You know, the me of even 5, 10 years ago could not imagine that I have gender magic, my very first book coming out so soon. And
Yeah.
at the point in my career that I'm at, that didn't seem like a possibility to me 5 years ago. And that changed dramatically in a short amount of time. And I have to imagine that whatever the next step in my life is, whatever the next step in your life is, might be beyond what you can imagine today.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, let's go. You know, like
Let's go.
it's so exciting. Ray, when was the last time you felt awe? Because I mean, clearly that's a big part of your life is the experiencing these amazing feelings. So when was the last time you felt awe?
Well, besides the octopus riding a
Right.
jellyfish, it was probably last week when I was in New York and I went to the youth led march for trans youth rights, and to just see these young people, these youth, really stepping up and leading the way, and having a crowd of, I don't know, probably 700 plus people around them supporting them, and the beauty there and the passion, it was awe-inspiring. And
Yeah.
the joy too, right? It wasn't a somber meeting. People were laughing, people were connecting, even in the midst of this very serious reason that we were brought together. And that was beautiful to see and awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I love that. I am continually amazed at the generation, Gen Z,
Hmm.
what they're doing and saying, and to watch their acceptance of one another. You
Yeah,
know,
it's beautiful,
this person wants to be called this. They're like, all right,
right? Doesn't have to be that big of a deal.
yeah, it's beautiful. When do you feel joy? Like, what's most joyful for you?
You know, at the risk of sounding cliche, this, like, I really
Yeah.
like connecting on a deep level with big conversations with people that I find inspiring and creative and
Hmm.
authentic and who are doing cool shit in the world. So I'm very seldom happier than when I am doing and having a conversation like this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And for people, I think that that's very inspiring and joyful. And also for me, what I was thinking about when I was reading your book was I was like, wow, I love learning. Um,
Yeah.
you know, like sometimes I feel like the people we're talking to are the people who already kind of know what we're saying. But I was like, I learned so much reading your book, and I was like, what if we just leaned into curiosity?
Yes.
I
Yes.
want to learn about this.
100%.
Yeah. And being amazed and awed and joyful about experiences that are different than mine.
Yes. It's a
So,
beautiful thing.
gosh, and I was like, this is fun. This is joyful. If people want to, when is the book coming out? How can people learn more about it? And what is next for you in this amazing work that you're doing in the world?
So, Gender Magic is coming out May 30th. It's available for pre order now.
Yeah.
You can find me. Instagram is kind of a hub. So, the Rae McDaniel, that's Rae, RAE,
Hmm.
McDaniel. You can also find me and the book at gendermagic.com. But Instagram has the links to buy the book, to find my website, to invite me to speak, and also importantly, to sign up for my mailing list. And as for what's next, you know, hopefully a prolific career as a best-selling author. That's
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
plan.
Hmm.
Speaker, thought leader, those are the things that I'm hoping will come from me putting my ideas out in the world in this really big way.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
Any last sort of words of wisdom for the audience I think that there can be, like I was saying, it's fun to learn about other people. So as we lean into our curiosity, like what's an idea or a thought that I could take with me to inspire me for the rest of the day?
I would say pay attention to that moment when your gut has the butterflies, like we talked about, but
Yeah.
also that catching of the breath, that like, because I found that whenever that hits, that is always a clue when that fear and excitement intermingle, that is the thing I should do because I care enough about it to be afraid of it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for your generosity of information. Thank you for your magic in the world. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was absolutely delightful.
Thank you. That's it, folks. Another amazing episode of Limitless with Lisa Z. I am inspired and want to give you the homework. Take some notes, take action, do one thing today that can move you towards your dreams. Got feedback? Let us know. You can write to us at lisa@lisazahiya.com or visit us online at lisazahiya.com.